Among history's most remarkable figures, two women stand whose strength and legacy still echo across centuries: Louise of Hesse-Kassel and Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel. Each left a lasting impression on Europe's royal web, rising from dynastic uncertainty to the heart of European power and influence. Let us begin with the first, Louise of Hesse-Kassel. Louise of Hesse-Kassel was born on the 7th of September in the year 1817 in Kassel, in the electorate of Hesse within the German Confederation. What shaped the girl born in a dissolving empire who would one day be called the mother-in-law of Europe? How did a minor princess, raised in Denmark and shadowed by dynastic instability, rise to become the matriarch of kings, queens, and empires? Her story unfolds through loyalty, politics, and the soft strength of calculated marriage and maternal influence. Please watch my full video until the end, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please make sure to share it with your friends. Thank you. Now, let us dive into the full story. Louise entered the world at a time of fading monarchies and shifting alliances. The daughter of Prince William of Hesse-Kassel and Princess Charlotte of Denmark, she spent most of her childhood in Denmark. Her Danish royal blood and Protestant lineage quietly positioned her as a candidate for dynastic continuity. While her early life lacked the grandeur of larger courts, Louise grew up amid a blend of German precision and Danish reserve. Her family, though not at the pinnacle of power, maintained valuable connections, a crucial factor as Denmark's royal succession crisis loomed. In this calm before the storm, a quiet queen in waiting began her journey. Though Louise was born in the German Principality of Hesse, her early life was closely tied to Denmark, where she was raised from the age of 3. Her mother, Princess Charlotte of Denmark, ensured that Louise and her siblings were immersed in Danish customs, language, and royal culture. In a household that blended German discipline with Danish gentleness, Louise developed the grace and restraint that would later define her public persona. Her upbringing was shaped by a strong awareness of royal duty and dynastic strategy. As the niece of King Christian VIII, Louise had a clear connection to the Danish throne, a fact that grew increasingly important as the kingdom faced a looming crisis in succession. Many older members of the royal family were childless, making the younger generation, including Louise, potential heirs. In this environment, family was more than affection, it was politics. Louise's siblings, including Prince Frederick William and Princess Marie-Louise Charlotte, were also viewed as possible links to future stability. Yet, it was Louise, calm, devout, and deeply loyal, who seemed best suited to help navigate the complex web of royal succession. Her early life in Denmark, surrounded by family yet aware of their political roles, gave her a quiet strength. This foundation of cultural identity and dynastic purpose would guide her through the turbulent decades to come, as she prepared, knowingly or not, to step into the heart of European royalty. On the 26th of May in the year 1842, Louise of Hesse-Kassel married Prince Christian of Schleswig-Holstein-Sonderburg-Glucksburg at Amalienborg Palace in Copenhagen. The match, though distant by blood, was dynastically strategic, a union that combined her senior claim to the Danish throne with Christian's more obscure but technically valid connection to royal succession. This was not a fairy tale romance, yet there was quiet respect and growing affection between the two. While Prince Christian lacked strong personal ambition, Louise's deep understanding of royal politics made her a natural partner for the challenges ahead. Their marriage was grounded in stability and shared purpose rather than grand passion, and this became the hallmark of their long life together. At the time of their union, the Danish monarchy was facing uncertain waters. The reigning king, Frederick VII, was childless, and dynastic continuity was in jeopardy. By pairing Louise's stronger hereditary claim with Christian's lineage, the marriage offered a possible solution to preserve the monarchy through compromise. But it was not without controversy. Their rights were challenged by rival houses, particularly the powerful Augustenborgs. Still, Louise and Christian remained committed to their quiet life, raising their children in a close-knit and disciplined household. As political currents swirled around them, the strength of their marriage, founded on shared responsibility, would soon prove vital in a time of national and dynastic transition. In the decades following Louise's marriage, Denmark's succession problem reached a boiling point. King Frederick VII remained without a dynastic heir, and the Danish royal line risked extinction. While Louise had a strong hereditary claim through her mother, Princess Charlotte of Denmark, the succession laws were complicated, blending agnatic traditions with allowances for female line descendants. At the center of the conflict stood the rival house of Augustenborg. They argued for a strictly male-only line of inheritance and claimed superior rights to the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. This house posed a serious threat not only to Louise and Christian's ambitions, but also to the very unity of the Danish realm. The Augustenborgs had German support, especially from Prussia, and their influence fueled rising tensions that would soon ignite into open rebellion. Behind the scenes, Louise worked strategically. Her mother and siblings officially renounced their rights in her favor, strengthening her position. Louise, in turn, transferred those rights to her husband, making him the clearest candidate to stabilize the throne. Still, the road was rocky. The royal court, the Danish parliament, and even foreign powers debated the future of the monarchy. In 1852, after intense negotiations and diplomatic pressures, an international treaty confirmed Christian as the official heir to the Danish throne. Louise's calculated sacrifice, giving up her own claim, became a decisive turning point. With her husband now secured as heir presumptive, Denmark's royal future rested on their shoulders, and Louise's quiet diplomacy had triumphed over noble rivalry. By the early 1850s, Denmark's monarchy had evolved into a constitutional system, a shift that demanded clarity in succession and legal process. In this transforming landscape, Louise of Hesse-Kassel and her husband Christian found themselves at the center of intense political negotiations. Though Christian had been internationally recognized as heir presumptive, securing that role within Denmark required official legislative confirmation. In the year 1853, Parliament formally amended the Danish law of succession. With royal assent, Christian was proclaimed hereditary Prince of Denmark. Though the move had King Frederick VII's reluctant approval, it reflected Louise's patient diplomacy and quiet resilience more than her husband's personal influence. Despite the king's disapproval of both Christian's claim and Louise's moral standards, especially given his own controversial marriage to Louise Rasmussen, the legal foundation had now been laid. Louise's influence was felt most powerfully behind the scenes. She avoided confrontation yet shaped outcomes. Her intelligence and unwavering loyalty were assets Christian relied on during these difficult years. While he remained reserved, Louise became the political and emotional anchor of their household, managing family life, preserving public dignity, and promoting Christian's legitimacy with calculated grace. The official elevation to crown princess status brought no lavish celebrations. Instead, it marked the end of uncertainty and the beginning of royal responsibility. With one legal stroke, Louise stepped closer to the throne, not through ambition, but through steadfast resolve, family loyalty, and quiet mastery of Denmark's shifting political tide. On the 15th of November in the year 1863, King Frederick VII passed away, and Christian ascended the throne as King Christian IX of Denmark. Beside him stood Louise of Hesse-Kassel, now Queen of Denmark. Her elevation was not only a personal milestone, but also the symbolic birth of a new royal dynasty that would ripple across Europe for generations. Unlike the grandeur often seen in royal transitions, their coronation was subdued. There was tension in the air, political uncertainty following years of succession disputes, and a nation unsure of its future under a new royal couple. Yet Louise entered her role with calm resolve. She was not a public speaker or ceremonial figure, but rather a quiet stabilizer who brought unity to the royal family. Her loyalty to Christian during their decades of struggle had strengthened their bond. Though theirs was originally a practical marriage, it had grown into one of deep companionship. Christian, often indecisive and reserved, leaned on Louise for counsel. Her intelligence, moral compass, and quiet strength became pillars of the early Glucksburg reign. Their lifestyle remained intentionally modest, in contrast to many European courts. This restraint helped the monarchy survive a changing era. And though the Danish people were slow to warm to their new queen, Louise's reputation began to rise, especially as her children married into the most powerful dynasties of Europe. With this new chapter, Queen Louise quietly stepped into history, ready to shape Denmark's legacy from behind the scenes. Louise of Hesse-Kassel was not only Queen of Denmark, she was the mother of a dynasty. With King Christian IX, she had 6 children who would go on to reshape the political map of Europe. Her quiet home at Bernstorff Palace became the birthplace of emperors, queens, and crowned heirs, all raised with the discipline, discretion, and duty that Louise herself embodied. Their eldest son, Frederick, would succeed as King Frederick VIII of Denmark. Alexandra married Edward, the future king of the United Kingdom, and became a beloved queen. George became king of Greece. Dagmar married into the Russian imperial family and reigned as Empress Maria Feodorovna. Thyra became crown princess of Hanover, while Valdemar served as a Danish admiral and maintained ties with the French and Russian courts. Louise's deep involvement in their upbringing and education shaped each child's sense of identity and purpose. She personally selected tutors, monitored their moral development, and ensured that even royal privileges came with discipline. Her influence stretched beyond motherhood. She arranged dynastic marriages with precision, often resisting German alliances in favor of pan-European ties. Though not flashy or publicly adored in her own right, Louise became known as the mother-in-law of Europe. Through her children and their heirs, she connected Denmark to nearly every major throne in the continent. With steady hands and unmatched vision, Queen Louise helped build a royal web whose threads would endure long after her own reign had passed. As queen, Louise of Hesse-Kassel led a life that blended tradition with modesty, distance with discipline. Unlike many queens of her time, she made no effort to court public affection or command attention through grandeur. She preferred seclusion, focusing on family, faith, and charity, all while staying quietly influential behind palace walls. At Bernstorff and Fredensborg, she maintained a private world where rules were observed, meals were simple, and routines seldom wavered. There was no extravagance. Her household was defined by moral restraint and Protestant ethics. Her devotion to Lutheran values shaped both her domestic life and public service. This simplicity became her hallmark, a conscious contrast to the more flamboyant European monarchies of the era. Though Louise avoided the spotlight, her reputation as a moral compass gradually took root. Her disapproval of King Frederick VII's scandalous marriage to Louise Rasmussen had once stirred division, but it also reinforced her image as a queen of principle. Over time, the Danish public began to see her not as distant, but dignified, a stabilizing figure during turbulent years. Her quiet control extended into sensitive family matters as well. When her unmarried daughter Thyra became pregnant in 1870, it was Louise who orchestrated a secret exile to protect the family's reputation. Her handling of the crisis was strict but effective, preserving both the monarchy's honor and her daughter's future. Behind her reserve, Queen Louise shaped public expectations of royalty, not through speeches or parades, but through consistent, unshakable integrity. In the year 1870, a private crisis threatened to shatter the carefully composed image of Denmark's royal family. Princess Thyra, the youngest daughter of Queen Louise and King Christian IX, became pregnant out of wedlock, a scandal with the potential to destabilize both her personal future and the public standing of the monarchy. Queen Louise responded with swift, discreet action. Drawing on her deep sense of duty and moral authority, she arranged for Thyra to be sent abroad, far from the eyes of the Danish press and court. The young princess gave birth in secret, and the child, a daughter, was quietly adopted by another family. The affair was never officially acknowledged during Thyra's lifetime, and the royal household maintained an air of silence around the incident. This hidden chapter revealed another layer of Louise's character, her stern resolve to preserve dynastic honor at any cost. To her, public scandal was not simply personal shame. It was a threat to national stability and the dignity of the crown. Yet behind her firm measures lay a mother's heartbreak. Louise bore the emotional burden of keeping the family intact, balancing compassion with control. For decades, the truth remained buried, whispered only in private circles. But the secrecy, carefully maintained by Louise, allowed Thyra to later marry respectably and serve her role as Crown Princess of Hanover. In managing this crisis, Queen Louise demonstrated that her influence extended far beyond ceremony into the deepest, most delicate corners of royal life. Queen Louise of Hesse-Kassel was no mere bystander in the grand stage of European royalty. She was its silent architect. Through careful planning, discreet negotiations, and unshakable resolve, she secured marriage alliances for her children that would connect Denmark to nearly every major throne in Europe. Her legacy was not only Danish, but continental. At a time when Europe was redefining itself through politics, war, and empire, Louise understood the enduring power of dynastic marriage. She carefully steered her daughters toward prominent royal suitors. Alexandra became Queen of the United Kingdom. Dagmar married into the Russian imperial family and became Empress Maria Feodorovna. Thyra joined the House of Hanover. Her sons, too, took influential roles, Frederick as King of Denmark, George as King of Greece, and Valdemar as a naval leader with pan-European ties. Louise's vision went beyond prestige. She believed that intermarriage between royal houses could secure peace, preserve cultural ties, and strengthen Denmark's influence without war or expansion. Her anti-German views shaped these choices. She avoided linking her children to Prussian nobility, instead fostering ties with the British, Russian, and Mediterranean monarchies. She personally oversaw correspondence between royal households, guiding her children through their roles and responsibilities in foreign courts. Letters between Louise and her daughter Alexandra reveal a mother deeply involved in not just ceremonial matters, but political strategy, family alliances, and cultural expectations. Her voice, though soft in tone, carried weight in decisions made far from Denmark. As family gatherings grew at Bernstorff and Fredensborg, Louise's role as the matriarch of modern royalty became clear. These royal reunions were more than social occasions. They were unofficial summits where personal bonds reinforced political ties. Louise didn't just raise kings and queens, she placed them, guided them, and kept them close. She remained a confidante, counselor, and symbol of unity even after her children took their thrones. Through this web of connections, she earned the title Mother-in-Law of Europe, a name that reflected her quiet power across courts and borders. Her strategy shaped not only her family's destiny, but the very fabric of 19th-century monarchy. While Queen Louise rarely stepped into the political spotlight, her quiet influence extended deeply into the cultural and charitable life of Denmark. A lover of music and painting, she cultivated an artistic spirit within her private world. She supported several artists, including Elizabeth Jerichau-Bormann, and even exhibited her own paintings, often giving them as diplomatic gifts to fellow royals across Europe. But Louise's most lasting impact came through her unwavering dedication to social welfare. She supported no fewer than 26 charitable organizations, many focused on the welfare of women, children, and servants. Her efforts were deeply rooted in conservative values. She believed in moral discipline, religious upbringing, and the dignity of service. In 1857, she founded the Louise Stiftelsen, an orphanage for girls that aimed to raise them as domestic workers. Her most cherished project, however, was the Diakonisse Stiftelsen, established in 1863. This foundation introduced the profession of deaconess to Denmark, combining religious service with health care and social support, a revolutionary idea at the time. Louise's charities weren't simply acts of kindness. They were responses to rising social tensions, including the growth of socialism and labor movements. She saw traditional service and piety as the best answer to unrest. Through these institutions, she shaped Danish society from the ground up, one child, one servant, one hospital at a time. Though often seen as reserved, Queen Louise left behind a network of compassion and structure, a social safety net stitched together with discipline, faith, and quiet foresight. In the final decade of her life, Queen Louise retreated further from the public eye, living in quiet seclusion at Bernstorff Palace. Age brought fragility. She became deaf and physically weakened, relying on the care of two devoted deaconesses from the very foundation she had established decades earlier. Yet even as her body declined, her mind remained sharp, and her presence within the royal family continued to command deep respect. She was surrounded by a vast web of children and grandchildren, many of whom now ruled across Europe. Visits from foreign royals, including the British, Russian, and Greek royal families, were not diplomatic events but family reunions. These gatherings at Fredensborg became known as the Days of Louise, filled with familiar warmth, even as Europe stood on the brink of a new and more dangerous era. Though she never sought public acclaim, her influence had become undeniable. Her silver wedding anniversary in 1867, her 70th birthday in 1887, and her golden wedding celebration in 1892 were marked with growing affection from the Danish people. By the time of her 80th birthday in 1897, she was seen not only as a queen but as a symbol of steadfast maternal devotion. In the silence of her final years, Queen Louise embodied dignity in decline. She did not leave behind grand speeches or monuments, only the memory of a woman who shaped nations quietly, one family at a time, with grace, vision, and unwavering loyalty to the crown. On the 29th of September in the year 1898, Queen Louise of Denmark passed away peacefully at Bernstorff Palace at the age of 81. Her death marked the end of an era, not only for Denmark, but for the intricate network of European royalty she had so carefully shaped. Though frail in her final years, she remained a central figure in the lives of her children and grandchildren, who now ruled from London to Athens to St. Petersburg. The nation mourned a queen who had never sought grandeur or spectacle, but who had become an enduring symbol of duty, family, and moral strength. Her funeral was held on the 15th of October in Roskilde Cathedral, the traditional resting place of Danish royalty. There, she was laid to rest with full honors beside her husband Christian IX, with whom she had shared over 5 decades of partnership. The ceremonies were solemn and dignified. Foreign royals traveled to pay their respects, not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection for the woman who had quietly bound their dynasties together. The Danish people, who had once viewed her with reserve, now remembered her with gratitude, not for public speeches or royal pomp, but for her unshakable presence during decades of change. In death, as in life, Queen Louise remained true to herself, serene, disciplined, and quietly powerful. Her influence did not fade with her passing. It echoed in the lives of those she raised, counseled, and guided from behind palace walls. In the years after her death, Queen Louise of Denmark was remembered less for grandeur and more for her extraordinary familial legacy. She became known across the continent as the mother-in-law of Europe, a title that spoke not only to her children's royal marriages, but to the quiet authority she held over Europe's most powerful houses. Her descendants would go on to influence the course of history in Britain, Russia, Greece, Norway, and beyond. Unlike Queen Victoria, whose fame was amplified by empire and personality, Louise ruled through influence rather than spectacle. She never gave public speeches, avoided court extravagance, and preferred modest, almost austere surroundings. Yet she achieved something remarkable. She crafted a new royal identity rooted in moral integrity, simplicity, and unbreakable family bonds. Her legacy lived on in the stability she brought to the Danish crown, the strength she gave her husband, and the discipline she instilled in her children. Through them, her values rippled outward, affecting the decisions of monarchs, the direction of dynasties, and even the image of modern royalty. Louise's family gatherings became famous throughout Europe, not just for their warmth, but for the political weight they carried. Her quiet presence commanded respect, and her wisdom guided royal households across multiple generations. She had no throne beyond Denmark's, yet her reach was global. In a world where queens were often measured by crowns and courts, Louise of Hesse-Kassel redefined what it meant to rule, not with a scepter, but with vision, steadiness, and unmatched maternal strength. Queen Louise of Hesse-Kassel left behind more than memories. She left a royal blueprint that would shape Europe for generations. Her legacy lived on not only through titles and bloodlines, but through the model she created, a monarchy grounded in family, faith, and purposeful alliances. While empires crumbled and borders shifted, the dynasties she helped craft remained enduring threads in the fabric of European royalty. Her vision was clear: strengthen the monarchy from within. She believed in domestic discipline, international marriage, and moral leadership as the tools to preserve royal relevance in a modern world. It was not charisma or conquest that defined her reign, but continuity. Her grandchildren would include George V of the United Kingdom, Nicholas II of Russia, and Constantine I of Greece, rulers whose decisions shaped the 20th century. Yet Louise's influence also carried a cautionary tale. The very web of royal families she built could not withstand the tides of war and revolution. By the early 1900s, the interconnectedness of Europe's monarchies, once her proudest achievement, became a symbol of fragility. The First World War would see her descendants on opposite sides of the battlefield. Still, Her ideals of duty, loyalty, and quiet strength endured. Queen Louise did not seek a legacy, she built one, woven silently through generations. In the story of Europe's royal past, her name may appear softly, but her impact remains unmistakable. Through her, the quiet hand of history left its deepest impression. Let us now turn to another remarkable figure of royal descent. Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel was born on the 7th of February in the year 1688 in the city of Kassel, in the Landgraviate of Hesse within the Holy Roman Empire. How did this seemingly modest princess rise to govern a republic not once, but twice? What gave her the strength to lead through war, flood, and famine, all while raising a fragile dynasty? And why, centuries later, do the Dutch still remember her with affection as Aunt Mary? Her quiet story reveals the strength of character history so often overlooks. Marie-Louise was the daughter of Charles I, Landgrave of Hesse-Kassel, and Maria Amalia of Kurland. She was one of 17 children born into a house steeped in military tradition and noble alliances. Her brothers included Frederick I of Sweden and William VIII of Hesse-Kassel, connections that later boosted her prestige as a marriage candidate. Though not considered beautiful by the standards of the time, Marie-Louise possessed a charm rooted in sincerity. She greeted those around her, noble or humble, with the same kindness and directness. That rare ability to connect with all classes would later serve her well in the Dutch Republic, where monarchs were expected to rule not only by birthright, but by moral example. From the beginning, her life seemed destined for something greater than courtly ceremony, something far more enduring. The story of Marie-Louise's marriage began not with romance, but with urgency and gunpowder. Johann William Frieso, the young Prince of Orange and heir to the Dutch House of Nassau, had narrowly escaped death twice, once from cannon fire and once from a near-fatal round shot. His mother, Henriette Amalia of Anhalt-Dessau, feared that if fate struck a third time, the Orange line might vanish. A bride was urgently required. Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel was chosen not for beauty or fortune, but for loyalty, lineage, and the military reputation of her father, Charles I, a trusted general under the Duke of Marlborough. When Johann William arrived in Kassel in early 1709, he met the 20-year-old princess and, within a week, agreed to the match. He did not even bother to meet the other potential candidate. The marriage took place on the 26th of April in 1709. Though brief, lasting just over 2 years, it was quietly successful. Johann William found in Marie-Louise a partner of kindness and stability. Together, they had 2 children, one of whom was born after his sudden death by drowning in July 1711. For Marie-Louise, the marriage marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another far more demanding one. She was now a widow, a foreigner, and the mother of an unborn heir to a republic that traditionally distrusted royal power. What followed would test every part of her character, not as a princess, but as a regent, mother, and silent architect of Dutch stability. Marie-Louise's life changed forever on the 14th of July in the year 1711. Her husband, Johann William Frieso, drowned unexpectedly while crossing the Hollands Deep, a sudden tragedy that left her a widow at just 23. Worse still, she was pregnant with their second child, the future William IV, who would inherit his father's title before even drawing his first breath. In a foreign land, with no political experience and facing the uncertainties of childbirth, Marie-Louise stood at the edge of overwhelming responsibility. The young widow, still grieving, was thrust into the heart of the Dutch Republic's future. When her son was born 6 weeks later, the infant automatically became Prince of Orange. The States General, the Dutch governing body, recognized Marie-Louise as regent, granting her full authority to govern in her son's name. It was an extraordinary act of trust. The Dutch were wary of centralized monarchical power, yet they saw in Marie-Louise a calm presence, rooted in nobility but free from arrogance. She accepted the role with quiet determination, fully aware of the burden it placed upon her. Behind the scenes, many doubted her abilities, given her age and foreign birth. Yet Marie-Louise neither complained nor retreated. She remained in Leeuwarden, the capital of Friesland, and began her regency with restraint and resolve. As storms, both literal and political, began to gather, the young widow who had lost a husband would now fight to preserve a future for her son and for the Dutch Republic itself. With her newborn son William IV officially declared Prince of Orange, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel began her first regency in the year 1711. She was just 23 years old, a foreign widow in a republic that prized independence and civic governance. Yet from the start, she approached her role not with ambition, but with humility, diligence, and a steady moral compass. Despite her inexperience, Marie-Louise quickly proved herself. She surrounded herself with capable advisors and took the time to understand the administrative machinery of the Dutch provinces, particularly Friesland. Rather than dominate with authority, she ruled by trust and cooperation, earning respect in a society cautious of princely overreach. Between 1712 and 1716, her leadership was tested by a string of national crises. Harsh winters and failed harvests brought widespread hunger, and the economy struggled under pressure. Then came the shipworm plague, a natural disaster that threatened to destroy the very dikes protecting the land from the sea. Rather than retreat behind palace doors, Marie-Louise took action. She traveled to The Hague and made an impassioned appeal before the States General. Her sincerity moved them to grant financial relief and send soldiers to assist in repairing the dikes. For the Dutch, this act of personal advocacy stood out. She was no distant regent. She was present, pleading, and persuasive. By 1730, when her son came of age, Marie-Louise had already established herself as a respected leader. Her first regency had shown the quiet power of patience, conviction, and a woman's steady hand in a time of turmoil. The year 1716 brought a catastrophe unlike anything Marie-Louise had yet faced. The shipworm, a small marine creature, began boring through the wooden planks of the Dutch dikes. Without immediate repair, entire regions risked devastating floods. Friesland stood vulnerable, and the regent faced a test not only of leadership but of survival. Resources were scarce. The region's economy was already suffering from failed harvests and bitter winters. The provincial authorities could not bear the cost alone. In a bold move that surprised even her critics, Marie-Louise traveled to The Hague to personally address the States General. Her presence there, a young widow, pleading not for her own power but for the safety of her people, carried enormous symbolic weight. She spoke plainly and with deep conviction. Her appeal was rooted not in grandeur, but in practical necessity and moral duty. Moved by her words, the States General agreed to provide emergency funding and dispatch troops to assist with the dike repairs. It was a rare moment of unity in a fractured republic, and one made possible by Marie-Louise's courage and clarity. This act of diplomacy not only protected Friesland from disaster, but solidified her place in the hearts of the Dutch people. She had crossed the line from royal figurehead to genuine leader, one who acted, sacrificed, and stood beside her people in their hour of need. In doing so, she quietly redefined what it meant to be a princess in a republic suspicious of royal power. Over time, the Dutch people gave Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel a name filled with affection, Marijke Meu, meaning Aunt Mary in the Frisian dialect. It was a title not of royalty, but of kinship. Though born a foreign princess, she had become one of their own. Through her humility, compassion, and unwavering dedication, Marie-Louise had earned something rare, the genuine love of a Republican people. She rejected the pomp often associated with royalty. Her court in Leeuwarden remained modest, her wardrobe plain, and her table simple. When asked why she did not dress more finely, she famously replied that she preferred to feed the poor rather than wear gold. Her approach to leadership was one of quiet service, never seeking admiration, but often inspiring it. Marie-Louise visited hospitals, founded orphanages, and donated discreetly to families in need. She made time to walk among the people of Friesland, listening to their concerns, asking about their children, and offering help where she could. The trust she cultivated was not political, it was personal. She was often seen attending local church services unannounced, sitting quietly among her people without special privilege. Her carriage rides avoided pomp, often stopping in small villages where she could talk to farmers and artisans, ask about their livelihoods, and even share a meal. In times of famine, she opened the palace granaries. In times of plague, she ensured that physicians and remedies reached the poorest homes. When harsh winters froze trade routes and darkened homes, Marie-Louise arranged for coal and wool to be distributed discreetly. She did not believe in charity for display, she believed in dignity for all. By living as a mother to her people as well as to her son, she built an enduring legacy. In a land where monarchs were often viewed with suspicion, Marie-Louise became a symbol of moral integrity and maternal care. Her name, spoken softly and fondly in village streets and marketplaces, became more than a title, it became a bond. Through kindness, she bridged the distance between throne and people. As both a mother and a regent, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel placed immense value on moral discipline and simplicity. She raised her son, William IV, in a household free from the usual indulgences of princely life. Tutors were carefully selected for their integrity, and lessons emphasized not only statecraft and history, but also religious devotion, humility, and civic duty. Marie-Louise believed that the strength of a ruler began at home. Her own upbringing in Hesse-Kassel, rooted in Protestant values and a tradition of service, shaped her parenting style. She discouraged extravagance, insisted on punctuality, and led by example in her daily routine. Even at the height of her regency, she would rise early, attend church regularly, and take time to review correspondence herself. Frugality was not born of necessity, but of principle. She rejected luxuries, often reusing gowns and limiting court expenses so that funds could be redirected to public welfare. This way of living created a stark contrast to other European courts, where excess and spectacle were common. In Friesland, her simplicity became a political statement, reinforcing trust in her leadership. As a mother, she was warm yet firm. She understood that her son's future would carry the weight of the Orange legacy, and she prepared him with patience, structure, and quiet encouragement. In doing so, she not only secured a competent heir, but ensured that the values she held dear would live on through him, values that would later guide a prince in turbulent times. Raising a future ruler in the midst of political uncertainty was no simple task. For Marie-Louise, motherhood and regency were intertwined. Each day required balancing maternal instincts with state responsibilities. As William IV grew, so too did the pressures of preparing him to one day lead a fragmented and watchful republic. From the beginning, Marie-Louise surrounded her son with educators who emphasized character as much as knowledge. Lessons were rigorous, but guided by compassion. She often reviewed his progress herself and insisted on personal accountability. The boy was taught to appreciate Dutch traditions, understand civic duty, and respect the rights of the provinces, ideals critical for a prince raised among republicans. But her challenges were not limited to academics. Court factions debated her influence, foreign relatives interfered, and some provincial leaders resisted her authority. Rumors occasionally surfaced questioning her regency or parenting choices. Marie-Louise responded with composed silence, never engaging in petty court politics. Instead, she focused on William's development, shielding him from scandal and modeling grace under pressure. She also prepared him for emotional resilience. Having lost his father before birth, William would carry a lifelong void. Marie-Louise filled that space with presence, guiding, comforting, and advising without overstepping. Her devotion gave him a rare emotional foundation for a royal child. By the time William came of age, he was not only a prince but a young man shaped by steadiness, patience, and deep ethical roots, all planted and nurtured by a mother who governed both her household and her country with unshakable resolve. In the year 1734, Marie-Louise witnessed one of the most significant milestones in her son's life, and in her own legacy as a regent mother. William IV of Orange married Anne, Princess Royal of Great Britain, the eldest daughter of King George II and Queen Caroline. This union was more than ceremonial. It was a diplomatic triumph, forging a strong alliance between the Dutch Republic and the British Crown. Marie-Louise welcomed Anne with cautious optimism. The Princess Royal was intelligent, ambitious, and accustomed to a powerful court. Her arrival in Leeuwarden signaled a shift, not just in status, but in household dynamics. Anne carried with her the influence of the British monarchy, and her personality often clashed with the modesty and reserve that Marie-Louise had long fostered. Still, Marie-Louise understood the importance of unity. She treated Anne with respect, offered guidance where welcomed, and gradually stepped back from court affairs to allow the young couple room to lead. The transition was not always smooth, and tensions occasionally surfaced, particularly around protocol and religion, but Marie-Louise's restraint kept conflict from overtaking duty. Despite differences, both women shared a deep love for William. Marie-Louise continued to support him privately, offering counsel shaped by years of leadership. In the end, her handling of the marriage with grace, wisdom, and quiet patience helped maintain a stable household and ensured the continuity of the House of Orange through one of its most politically sensitive unions. After decades of public service and 2 regencies, Marie-Louise gradually stepped away from court life. Following her son's marriage and the establishment of his independent rule, she chose to retire to Harlingen, a quiet port town in Friesland. There, far from the formalities of Leeuwarden, she embraced a life of reflection, modesty, and spiritual devotion. Harlingen offered peace, but Marie-Louise's presence still drew attention. Locals spoke of her simplicity, how she walked unescorted through the streets, attended church regularly, and greeted townspeople without pretense. She became a part of the community, remembered not as a grand duchess, but as a wise elder who had once led with strength and selflessness. She continued her charitable work quietly. Widows, orphans, and refugees often found support from her personal funds. Letters from this period reveal a woman still engaged with the world, offering advice to her son and gently corresponding with political and religious leaders. Her retreat from power was not an escape but a final act of service, showing that dignity need not rely on titles. Even in retirement, she modeled the virtues she had long practiced: humility, kindness, and moral clarity. In Harlingen, she lived not as a ruler or regent, but as Marijke Meu, the people's aunt, who never stopped caring for those around her. It was a fitting second chapter for a woman who had spent her youth navigating court intrigue and her middle years preserving a republic. Now, in her twilight, she found peace not in grandeur, but in grace. Marie-Louise's retirement in Harlingen was peaceful, but history called upon her once more. In the year 1751, her son William IV passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind a young son, William V, just 3 years old. The Dutch Republic again faced a leadership vacuum, and once again, all eyes turned to the woman who had once guided it through crisis. At 71 years old, Marie-Louise accepted the regency for her grandson. It was a remarkable return, not only because of her age, but because she had already fulfilled this duty once before. Now, she stepped into the same role she had held 4 decades earlier, with the same steady resolve but deeper wisdom. The political landscape had changed. Tensions between the provinces, internal factions, and foreign pressures made this regency more delicate. Yet Marie-Louise navigated the complexities with characteristic humility. She did not impose herself but served as a stabilizing figure while others handled the daily governance. Her name alone reassured many, a symbol of continuity and trust. During this period, she worked quietly behind the scenes, advising key officials, protecting her grandson's inheritance, and maintaining the dignity of the House of Orange. Though she never sought power, she accepted it when duty demanded. Her return to the regency was not a tale of ambition, but of responsibility, a testament to her enduring sense of purpose. In stepping back into leadership in her 8th decade, Marie-Louise reminded the nation that true service has no retirement, and that devotion to country, like love, endures across generations. Throughout her regency and retirement, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel remained deeply guided by her Protestant faith. But unlike many rulers of her time, her religious devotion was marked not by rigidity or exclusion, but by compassion and tolerance. She understood the pain of religious persecution. Her own ancestors had once fled oppression, and she quietly ensured that Friesland became a place of safety for others in need. Under her influence, Leeuwarden and its surrounding towns became informal sanctuaries for displaced Protestants, particularly from France and the Palatinate. Refugees arrived fleeing war, famine, or forced conversion. Marie-Louise never made public declarations, but her court discreetly helped these families settle, providing housing, food, and support. Churches were allowed to operate without harassment, and civic leaders followed her example of quiet inclusion. She also supported Jewish families facing restrictions elsewhere. Though formal equality would not come until much later, Marie-Louise permitted them to trade and reside more freely in Friesland. Her policies were never written into grand reforms. They lived instead in the daily kindnesses she extended. Her vision of faith was both personal and public. She supported religious education, rebuilt churches damaged by neglect or disaster, and sponsored Bible translations into Dutch and Frisian. Yet her most powerful sermons were in action, offering dignity to the unwanted and shelter to the hunted. In an age still haunted by sectarian division, Marie-Louise stood for a gentler path, one where belief did not exclude, and where power could protect rather than persecute. In her final decades, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel became less a political figure and more a moral force. Though no longer active in court politics, her influence persisted through the quiet consistency of her values, compassion, simplicity, and reform. Her legacy unfolded not in speeches or proclamations, but in the lives of the people she touched. Charity remained central to her daily life. She gave generously to orphanages, almshouses, and hospitals, not through grand foundations, but direct gifts, often anonymous. Town records show small, regular donations made in her name or by her hand, supporting everything from schoolbooks to firewood for the poor. Her rooms in Leeuwarden and later Harlingen remained unadorned, her household minimal. She often said, "One cannot lead the people and live above them." Marie-Louise also supported small-scale reforms that improved daily life in Friesland. She encouraged better sanitation in urban areas, supported the training of midwives, and advocated for education among girls, progressive acts for a woman of her era. She did not fight loudly for change, but modeled a better way forward. Officials and townspeople alike admired her not because she held power, but because she used what influence she had with care and integrity. Her guidance was sought even in old age, as younger leaders looked to her for wisdom rooted in lived experience. In these quiet gestures, Marie-Louise shaped a softer revolution, one of service, simplicity, and the belief that goodness could govern just as surely as laws. As the years drew on, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel gradually returned to Leeuwarden, where she had once governed as regent and mother of the prince. Now, in her 80s, she was no longer a central political figure, but her presence still radiated calm authority. She spent her final years in quiet reflection, writing letters, receiving visitors, and walking slowly through the city that had long been her home. Her daily routine remained simple. She attended church services faithfully, often sitting among common townspeople rather than demanding a special seat. Neighbors recalled her warm smile, her inquiries about their health, and her ability to remember names and family histories. For many, she represented a living connection to a more stable past, a time when care and character shaped public life. Though no longer involved in governance, Marie-Louise remained an advisor in spirit. Letters show that she corresponded with her grandson William V, offering gentle guidance as he matured into leadership. Her advice was never forceful, but it reflected a lifetime of service and deep understanding of human nature. She also ensured that her final wishes were modest. There would be no lavish ceremonies or towering memorials. Her greatest monument, she believed, was the affection of the people, the farmers, merchants, and mothers who remembered her as Marijke Meu, not just a royal, but a presence of comfort. Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel passed away peacefully on the 9th of April in the year 1765 in Leeuwarden. Her memory lived on not only in archives and portraits, but in the quiet gratitude of a people she had served with humility and grace. In her final chapter, Marie-Louise embodied the idea that legacy is not only what one builds, but also what one leaves behind quietly in hearts, habits, and memory. Long after her death in 1765, Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel's legacy continued to grow in ways few could have predicted. Though she had never sought the spotlight, history would come to know her as the matriarch of a sweeping royal lineage. Through the marriages of her children and grandchildren, she became a common ancestor to monarchs across Europe, from the Netherlands to the United Kingdom, Denmark, Norway, and beyond. Her son, William IV, and his wife, Anne, Princess Royal, produced a line of descendants that would intertwine with nearly every major royal house. Generations later, Queen Victoria, King Christian IX of Denmark, and other towering figures would trace their ancestry back to the quiet regent who once ruled from Leeuwarden. Yet her influence was never just biological. The values she instilled, humility, faith, service, and frugality, echoed through these royal lines. Marie-Louise never sat on a throne herself, but her principles helped shape those who did. In a world often driven by spectacle and conquest, her story offered a gentler legacy that quiet leadership can ripple across centuries. Some genealogists have even called her one of the most genetically influential women in European history. From royal portraits in London to state archives in Oslo, her name appears again and again. A hidden thread in dynastic charts, a gentle hand guiding the course of royalty. Unlike monarchs who claimed fame through wars and treaties, Marie-Louise left no grand monuments, yet her presence is etched into the bloodlines of modern kings and queens. Today, historians remember her not for conquests or commands, but for constancy. She governed without arrogance, parented with patience, and lived with grace. Her nickname, Marijke Meu, still stirs affection in Friesland, a sign that greatness is not always loud and that the truest queens may be those who never wear a crown. Her life remains a blueprint for quiet power and a reminder that true nobility is measured in character, not in ceremony. She remains Europe's quiet matriarch, seen not in titles, but in the values that endure through generations. What do you think about Queen Louise of Hesse-Kassel? Was she a brilliant architect of royal destiny, a mother to kings and queens, whose quiet diplomacy and devotion reshaped Europe's thrones for generations? Or was she simply a royal consort, remembered more for her children's rise than her own role, her voice softened beneath the shadow of her husband's reign? And what about Marie-Louise of Hesse-Kassel? Was she the gentle force behind a republic, a regent who led with wisdom, compassion, and tireless resolve through war, widowhood, and political uncertainty? Or was she a forgotten widow, quietly fading into the background, known to history more as a nickname than as a sovereign presence? Were these women the silent threads binding dynasties together, or the unseen hands that shaped a continent? Did their restraint hide quiet power, or did history overlook the strength that guided courts, calmed nations, and touched countless lives? We would love to hear your thoughts. Please share your reflections in the comments, and if their stories moved you, do like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more journeys into the forgotten corners of history. Thank you so much for watching.